Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Area Control Bros. Sorry for the 2 week delay, but work and life get in the way when you're not a professional podcasting trio. So we're
Yeah.
here at last. And this week we're planning to talk about a game called Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor. And it's a little bit out of our normal kind of range of games because it is co-op. Although we did talk about a co-op game last time, so I guess we've been kind of out of our usual alley for 2 episodes in a row. But the this game does have area control elements, like there's certainly area control, and so it counts. We're allowed to
It
talk about
does.
it. And this game is not very well known. The As far as crowdfunding goes, because this is a crowdfunded game, although I didn't personally pick it up off crowdfunding, I got it on Facebook Marketplace off a guy. Because I was interested in the idea of a co-op 4X game. It just kind of sounds like two inherently kind of perhaps not paradoxical, but not necessarily aligned board game mechanics. And it turned out to be pretty interesting. And but anyway, the point is it's kind of hard to acquire right now, and I think we should address that right away, which is that it's hard to get this game. And they are going to be running a new crowdfunding campaign, I believe, this winter, in which case, if this podcast has induced you to being interested in the game, I'd recommend you waiting for that and not being scalped by people on eBay for some ridiculous price because even though this game is not popular, the people that do want to play it are obviously willing to pay a lot to play it, and scalpers have noticed that.
Yes.
Um,
It's by a it's a very indie game. These guys are people that just decided to basically make their dream game, and that's it. This is their one game. They were like, nobody's done this exact game before, and so we're going to be the ones to do it. And so I respect that. They're just and they haven't really when they've come back to crowdfunding, they've just come back and added expansions to it because it's just I watched an interview with them and they're just like totally stoked that it even worked at all, so good for them.
Yeah, how cool. I wouldn't have guessed that. I didn't know that about this game, but it feels very well put together. It doesn't feel like uh anybody's first attempt at a game,
Yeah,
very
it's
well
surprising.
polished.
yeah,
I don't know the full story, but I think this is one of those ones that they probably had in prototype for a long time because they were like, and then they iterated on it. They brought it to cons. Their friends tried it, and then gradually it took form as in its current state, which is I don't think you could ever criticize this game for not being polished.
Right.
The production
yeah.
is excellent. Um, Probably some of my favorite production of any board game, and it doesn't really have much indication that it is by an indie team, as Blake said. So that's great. Again, happy to see it. Happy that these guys have been successful to some extent, and I hope that this game gets big enough in its next run, maybe that it like pops off and hits $1 million or whatever, because I don't think they were there before. Because there's a market for this game, and there's a market for co-op that's more than just kind of Spirit Island. And Spirit Island is a good game, of course, and well regarded, but I think this is a very different niche than Spirit Island. Um, but the people who play Spirit Island might also enjoy this, I guess is my point.
Yeah. What is the weight on this? What did they give it on the BGG? Because I know
Th-
this is a it's a decent. It's got some decent crunch.
This is a
Um,
it's a 3.73,
yeah.
That's
which
around where Andromeda's Edge was rated, if I remember correctly.
yeah, I think that Andromeda's Edge was around here, and so was Primal actually, which I consider Primal to be heavier than this, certainly in
Yeah,
terms of
Primal
upkeep.
definitely heavier than this. I would say Andromeda's Edge probably heavier than this as well, but maybe that's just
There,
familiarity with Uprising at this point, you know?
yeah, I mean, there's some more like procedure kind of stuff going on with Andromedas. Like that's where some more of the weight is. Like you have to like do some like more accounting, and this game has some like procedure stuff as all games do, where like it's like the administrative, like you just got to do like, oh, we're reading an event or we're doing this. But I feel like a lot of the weight in this game like matters, like there's a good amount that you can like end up like intuiting, you know? Like
Hmm.
there's like I feel like this game encourages a lot of just like fuck it, we ball. Like, like there's like a good amount of times where like even with the way that the quests are set up, you're like, am I the best person to be doing this? Ah, fuck it, whatever. I probably have a chance,
Yeah,
Like,
let's go.
The dice are lubricant for the design because there are a lot of times where it's like, well, if not now, then when? We got to do it, you
Right.
know?
yeah.
And I feel like also I agree with Ben. I think that there are a lot of games around this way, Andromeda's Edge included, where you might like forget something, like a little, like a stray rule or like something that's lurking off to the side. Um, but I feel like everything is in this game is like important and has to be there. And so, with the exception of the Blessings mini expansion, it took me some time to track down, which I now like my solution is to tuck it under like the enemies. Nothing's really forgettable. Like when you're rolling lightning bolts, you're like, "Oh my God, what's the druid? Can we save the situation?" Whereas
Hmm.
like and or all and the only thing that strikes me as being something that might be easy to forget is maybe if you are in like very deep in late game and you got a huge pool of like items and things and you got to
Yeah.
go back to your tableau and be like, okay, like, can I fix this situation? Like, what do I have? Do I have like something that can change a role? But again, I think that's good because like this game has a beautiful sense of progression. There are only 4 rounds in the game, which is crazy because the game takes, 3 or 4 hours. And but a lot happens, and the amount of increase in like your main hero and sort of your faction's power in each round is quite significant. Like you'll get access to a lot more feats, as they're called in this game, and you'll get a lot more items. You'll get access to other things. You'll probably have a better economy, build more units, and so you get a really kind of it's almost like I can't call it a speed run because the game is long, but in terms of the amount of rounds in the game, you progress quite quickly. Like you escalate yourself noticeably by the end of the game. You can do a lot more.
Yeah, and there's usually a good amount of ability to come back when you end up getting behind, and there's usually like a lot of drama in the game. Like the game is always dramatic, and it has a very interesting um, win condition for a co-op game that I don't think I've seen before, which is just that like you have a limited amount of ways to give VP to other people. It's like a VP track, and you've got the two enemy factions on the VP track with you. And every single person who's a player at the table has to end with more VP than both of the like enemy factions by the end of the game. And that like naturally puts together a lot of tension because you all need to be like rising somewhat equally. Like you can't have somebody just like who's like completely doing hero mode. Because like if one person gets like wiped out and they're not going to be able to like score very well, you have to try to like figure out a way to lift them up and to like and it's very thematic for the game because like part of it is that you're like these you're these different factions that historically didn't really get along. And you're trying to form this coalition like in the aftermath of the world getting completely fucked.
Yeah.
And you're stuck between the empire and chaos, and you're just trying to figure out like you're just trying to carve out a little like land of peace between the two.
Yeah, the setting is cool for this game. Like I love the theming. I'd say it's post-apocalyptic fantasy, but that's not entirely true. It's more like in between apocalypses fantasy. Because like
Hmm.
almost the entire planet has been blown up by this magic spell that went wrong. and only this kind of piece of land is all that's left. But then the remnants of that spell and like chaos uh also showing up is like everybody is showing up on this patch of land and is also blowing that part of land up too. So it's kind of like you're in the middle of another kind of the aftermath, which is also a pop apocalyptic in nature. So there's this kind of heightening tension where like things are getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Um, I think we should just talk about the structure of the game really quick though, which is just that so this is a co-op 4X game like I mentioned before. And I guess if I had to sort of give an elevator pitch to somebody as to what this game is, I'd say it's like, well, it's like Twilight Imperium if you were all like working together to defeat two really big bad factions, you know?
Yeah, if it
Like
was like the Gene Sorcerers versus the Lazics or whatever, you
or like
know?
yeah, or if it was like, Necrovirus has spiraled out of control and yeah, and the Mahawk show up and you have to deal with the both of them and they're both as powerful as any two or three of your factions and you have to collectively deal with them.
Yeah.
Is kind of the idea behind this game. And they said even that this is inspired by Twilight Imperium a lot, which I think shines through. Obviously, the Huquan.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
one of the factions
love the
is the
Haquan.
Haquan.
Yeah, there is a faction of cat people who are very obviously inspired by the Emirates of Hakan, and their name is Huquan, and it's sort of like a running joke for us that I think anybody who's played both games would immediately recognize.
Yeah, it feels like the Hakan like crash landed into this weird world,
Yeah.
and they got a deal.
Yeah, it's
Um,
pretty fun. But the factions are fun in this game. They're not as asymmetric as TI or some games that we play, but they're asymmetric enough. And I think, especially when you include like the feat decks for the different heroes and things, that certainly by the end of the game, you feel like a very distinct faction and you'll have strengths. And because it's co-op, like somebody's got to be the magic guy, somebody's got to be the leadership guy for doing quests and the game is very smart at how it incentivizes you to differentiate yourselves to better allocate these items and quests amongst yourselves. And as Ben said, because of the system, everybody needs to be up above a certain VP threshold. It's encouraging everybody to be conscious of like the VP that you're scoring and maybe allowing for other people to score VP or generating VP for them. Because I think if that weren't the case, it'd be very easy for someone doing really well to just be like, well, I don't care about you guys as long as I'm above the VP threshold, and have some sort of weird, partial allied victory at the end.
yeah, I think it's good that they do tie it all back to like you have to win or lose together, you know. This and that's part of why I think that this design is so cool is that you have all these crazy elements coming together. These factions you're fighting are sending out absolutely massive units, and I suppose you can really tailor the difficulty on this game. You could tailor this game to have a really easy win, and you would still probably have fun because it's a very pretty game. You're getting to roll your dice, and there's some excitement there, even if the enemies coming out a little bit weaker or what have you. But um, man, I mean, the difficulty we play at this game is quite hard, and it certainly can be if you choose to go down that route. Um, and despite that, everything comes up feeling relatively balanced. You kind of get, as Will said, you get that TI feel in a little bit of a smaller package and while working together. And I think part of why you get that feeling is because you're working together. It's hard to emulate that sense of like um, alliance and the trading and the sort of table talk that you get by way of playing something like TI or some other epic, space
Like Dune.
opera like Dune. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
And
think that having it be co-op does help some with that. Who's going to
yeah.
deal with, the Empress that came out or what have you.
Yeah, and the weight is very important for that. I think as we've talked about before, like you it's like your faction always has like enough going on that it's like you can't get into a really like a quarterbacking position. It's usually like this mutually beneficial, or it's like somebody's like, volunteering to fall on the sword. It's not like It's not
Yeah.
like, oh, you have to do this thing right now. It's like, hey man, like you're in a really rough spot. I think I can handle him. Like send him
Hmm.
my way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like the Imperial targeting system is so cool. It's kind of like letting the players choose who that particular Imperial like hero is going to come after. And then also thematically, chaos just kind of like showing up and doing whatever is also thematic. But you also have a greater ability to manipulate chaos because it's like we, the factions, and the Imperials are both more intelligent than Chaos, which is just like unrefined evil rampaging. But you can kind of corral them and sort of control and sort of manipulate the path they take to the center of the board in such a way that it benefits the player or, sets up a confrontation between Chaos and the Imperials, which usually is good for the players also, just to have them fight each other.
Yeah, which is one of my favorite parts is that the two factions are like that you're opposing are fighting each other. And I love being able to play them off of each other. It's one of my favorite parts of this game. Because like it's this completely no stakes battle where like both outcomes are great for you. Like you have it's like okay, one of these big problems that we've been putting off is going to take care of one of the other big problems we've been putting off.
There are sometimes the lightning bolt effects that could like affect us
Yeah.
outside of battle, like the Haven destruction one, and some things that might spawn skeletons or curses or that kind of thing. But oftentimes you're happy, well, maybe not about the Haven one, but just in general, you're happy to see them fight regardless, even if there's like a minor problem that occurs, because it can be extremely costly in manpower to defeat any of these guys. And I guess we should talk about dice
Yeah,
in
dice.
this game because it's a natural segue here when we talk about combat. This game is probably it's funny because in previous podcasts we've talked about mixed feelings on dice and games and that sort of thing, and we like them in some contexts, a bit don't like them in others, but this game embraces dice in a way that I think is kind of hilarious.
Yeah,
Like
it's like in every little corner of this game, you've got dice. You're going questing. All right, get out your hero dice. What is that all about? It's everything here.
but I
I
think
think that
that
you're
yeah.
checking dice so often that you end up, kind of getting average luck over time. But you have these really high highs of like, oh man, I got that insane roll and got to win that combat without losing anybody. And then maybe you have these really low lows as well, and you got to figure out what you're going to do, how you're going to build back. Um, and then there's some in between, maybe you miss a quest or something, and there's a little bit of a downside. But yeah,
Yeah, one thing we talked about in the Dot Dice episode was I brought this game up as an example and also ATO as the dice being in the game and being this element of uncertainty, even when you have ways to mitigate it, when you got ways to re-roll, to flip dice, to choose what dice you're bringing, this element of fear is so important for this game because there is this fear pervading the whole experience of playing this game, which is good. You like it creates this feeling of like the bad guys being worth fearing, like, oh my God, what if he rolls well and I roll poorly and I can't fix it enough? And then it means that similarly, you value extremely highly any of the ways to manipulate the results of the dice because you are afraid. And that kind of thing is great because if the enemies weren't worth fearing, if it were possible to just deterministically defeat each of these guys, then I think this game would be less fun and maybe it would take longer because you'd be in this position where you're like mapping out exactly how to do it. But because it's encouraging you to be like, well, you got about as good as a situation as you have for fighting this guy, so just go do it. And then you go do it. And um I mean, I think that's good for this kind of game. You're just encouraging people to just take the plunge and jump in the cold water.
yeah,
And
you can save more of the deep strategy for, how are we going to manipulate the pathing on these enemies, or, who should be getting which item, what item is going to synergize best with the rest of a person's kit based on like what hero they got or what have you. I think those decisions are typically more interesting in a game than sitting there and deciding, will I or will I not win this combat? It's easier just to, like you said, okay, I got a pretty good chance here. Let's just go for it. And then I can think about the fun stuff, you know?
Well, I think also I feel like this game with more deterministic combat, you can easily imagine it getting bogged down tremendously, um, with how
Yeah.
complicated it might be, with all the different unit types and the different enemies and
Yes.
terrain. Um,
Whereas with the dice system, you've got, I think, five different colors of dice, and they have various distributions of these symbols on it. There's three symbols. And then you can also have combinations of symbols or double of symbols, but there's three symbols. There's a damage symbol, there's a block symbol, and then there is this special symbol, this lightning bolt that can either ignore an enemy shield or trigger special abilities. You get these druid cards that everybody has access to, and they're quite strong, and so you're thrilled about these. Um, but then, so again, are shields, and so maybe you're really favoring the blue dice because you like being able to block. And okay, well, you'll have units that have blue dice that they roll, and or maybe you're really favoring the lightning bolts, and so you're trying to use your purple dice units, or maybe you just want to be able to do a ton of damage, and you might have a unit that has a black dice, and that's insane, that sort of thing. Um, and then you also have two phases that you roll these dice in terms of combat. You have an archery phase, which is basically just before the other phase, and what is that? The clash phase. I think
yeah, it's
most
Clash.
Yeah.
dice are rolled during clash, and as a result, archery is really, really strong because if you eliminate a unit, they're not going to have that dice for the clash phase. Um, and
It's
so
like
yeah,
an
there's enough
anti-fighter
to
barrage.
differentiate the units based on like, well, what dice do they get? Do they have archery? If they have archery, they get both archery and clash. Um, so archery really, really good. And that's plenty enough to differentiate the units, but not so much that you can't like look and see, well, what dice does this unit roll and win and be able to understand it really, really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of elegant where it's like, yeah, this unit rolls orange dice, and you have a cheat sheet, and it's like, okay, that's everything I need to know.
Yeah.
And every unit has 1 HP. There's like a unit. The system is like universal enough, where there's nothing with like sustained damage. Anything could just die in one hit, and it just has that color of die. It kind of I guess that's why another reason why I don't think this game feels its weight as much because everything is kind of designed in a way that feels quite smooth, and you don't necessarily have to be spending brain power on the things that would not be that interesting. Um, and you can
There,
spend your
there
brain.
is one place I can think of that's particularly fiddly, and that's the dice distribution on the like big boss enemies changing as they're damaged can be
That
a
is
little
that
bit.
that that is fair. I was gonna say I think we don't necessarily have to go into cons right now, but I guess if I were gonna say a con is that I think in general the management of the bosses is not perfect. I don't mind it, but you have like a little piece of like plastic that's shaped like a tentacle. I love the components in this game. And you kind of slide it down the sheet of cardboard to show them losing life. And at each tier of life they're losing, essentially, threat, as it's called in this game, it changes their dice pool. And so it does slow things down a little bit where it's like, oh, they're injured now, so they're rolling what die? This, and this. Wait, what was the last one? There's a little bit of slowdown that happens there. And it's one of those things where it is a little bit noticeable how fiddly and annoying that is. I agree, Blake, but I just don't know
If
how
you have
else they
multiple
do it.
people running the combat, which you always do, it ends up not being too big of a
It's not
deal.
too big a deal, yeah.
It just bogs it down the tiniest bit, and like, what are you gonna do to improve it? Instead of the tentacles, are you gonna do like a some sort of card with like a wheel that rotates to show what the? I mean,
That's
it's
the
not gonna
thing
change it
is
anything,
that's the thing
Yeah.
is
it's
like
kind of fine the way it is. It's just part of
yeah,
the
I don't
system.
know how you fix it with the system and like it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's just it does take up some time to
Yeah.
manage.
Yeah. But it's not too bad. I mean, like most of the core game is just like, okay, it's time to roll. What dice am I rolling? That's like
Yes.
most of like the decision you have to make in combat or like in a quest. And that is like the core mechanic is what is the like what colored candies am I throwing down?
Right.
Like
Always comes back to eating. Um,
Uh, and
yeah.
we did bring up Spirit Island, which I wanted to talk about. And that one is one that's kind of deterministic. And the fun in Spirit Island is the like kind of like table talk between probably you and one other person. I don't know how well Spirit Island plays past two.
People do
But
it, but it's totally better at two,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
or
wouldn't
even
play it
one.
above two either. Yeah.
yeah, but it's totally like that's part of the point of Spirit Island is that you have this kind of deterministic, like more or less system. Like you're talking tactics. You're like, okay, well, how are we gonna kill the conquistadors here? Like, what do we need to worry about next round? Like, okay, we really need it. Like, can you do like you can do this, I can do this. Maybe it's better if I do this way. Whereas a lot of the table talk in this game is strategy, which is more of the overarching, like, well, this person's behind. How do we get them ahead? How are we trying to funnel this enemy in the long term? Is this guy a problem? It seems like that spider dude is kind of just fucking off in one corner of the map. Like maybe we don't really have to deal with him. Um,
This is not fully related to what you're saying, but I just love how thematic this game is. Every game of this that we play is like it's just this hilarious story.
Yes, absolutely. It really does lend itself to a good
You know,
story, this one.
like the spider guy getting teleported like to the other side of the map, but then he's like, "Oh God, I'm late to work. I gotta get back to the prison."
Right.
You know, and he kind of ambles across the map back to the prison. He just stays there until the end of the game.
Yeah, for those in the know, we're talking about the Mage Breaker, who
yeah.
like set, these Imperial guys set a target and then they go to their target. And Mage Breaker, somehow we got him to set a target that wasn't one of us. And so we just ended up on our like
Yeah.
going to this spot on the map and chilling
Well,
there.
it's a tile you flip, and like it generates a legion, but the legion's target is the prison. So it's like the
Right.
Imperial prison is guarded by some badass. But then,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah,
so
his thing is that he's supposed to go and destroy all of the sea towers. Like his target is supposed to be a sea tower, and he goes and destroys that tile and then goes to the other ones and he kind of just like does a little triangle around the map. Like that's what he's supposed to do, but like the prison like supersedes that placement. So he like got to blow up one sea tower and then it was like, no, you're needed across the map. Like, what are you
yeah,
doing over there?
the sea towers are like his hobby, but like he had to make it to his day job. You know, it
Right.
was
Then he chilled there till the last turn
yeah.
when he got slayed.
hmm But I mean, gosh. And we have like the ongoing lore for the Imperial Guard just being like the strongest dude. He's like stronger than the Empress or like anything.
Oh God, the
Yeah.
Imperial Guard is a badass.
The only thing that's stronger than the Imperial Guard is the literal apocalyptic Kraken beast.
Yeah, that thing's always so
And
annoying.
given the
And
opportunity, he might take it. Like,
And you play this game a few times, you start like fearing particular enemies because they, despite the system being relatively simple, they do a lot with them and they really differentiate these creatures, They most of them are coming in and maybe they can take six hits worth of damage. But between the dice that they roll and um, what happens when they come into play and maybe they're taking resources from you or what they do with their lightning bolt rolls, all of it makes them feel very, very different, and you're scared of them in different ways, and you want to assign them uh, targets with different people, different kits that you have on your table,
Yeah.
which is cool, And I like talking about that stuff. I like talking about the strategy of that, of how are we going to divvy up this great battle that we have.
Yeah, I also like that they do make you dislike them. Like there are some guys that just come out and like you lose half of like one kind of resource and you're like, wow, screw this guy. Like,
Yeah.
you
There's no
know?
question that the Empire is like evil. They just stole half my salt.
Yeah.
I just kind of, well, I think it's like the Empire wants the salt so that it can have the army to go fight these guys independently of you. So it's like
Mm.
they're trying to preserve this little patch of land in their own way. It just we got to get them out of there as well. perhaps we're the bad guys and the Empire was the good guys all along.
Nah,
It,
man, you're fascists. Get them out of here.
I feel that we've almost certainly talked about this particular element of this game in other episodes, but rather than having miniatures on the board, this game has little acrylic standees. And, so they're full color. Um, they're easily recognizable by faction because like other than the actual depiction of whatever creature it is or whatever, they have like a particular color of plastic that corresponds to your faction color. It's very readable, the board as a result. And I am not the type to want to paint miniatures. And so to me, seeing like an acrylic standee with a full color picture on it is so much cooler, and I really hope that this game has a lot of success with its next printing. And I really hope to see more of those acrylic standees in the hobby because I think it's a great, great way to do it. And I think it really adds to this game.
Yeah, I mean, I want it to be successful both on its own merits and because I think if it were influential in how the production of this game looks, then that's good for the hobby because these standees are less expensive than minis for the consumer, as far as I understand, and I assume for the production. But it's also probably my favorite board game production for characters. I don't know how you'd specifically refer to, minis or standees as kind of a general thing, but just this is my favorite depiction, perhaps, of your troops and your units and the enemy units of any board game that I've ever played. And
Hmm.
it's like everything just looks great. As Blake said, it's readable. There's a lot of personality, different shape standees, and different size standees too, because your own big guy is going to be bigger than your small standees, your little basic troops and stuff. And so even within the world of standees, you have a nice little differentiation.
And
Um,
they can be significant, like they can look really big, but because they're kind of two-dimensional, you can put a bunch of them next to each other and without filling up this one space on the board too much. I mean, the
yeah.
spaces get pretty full when you have your full army and you've got the enemy in there, and then you've also got your hero in there, but they don't take
Yeah.
up that much space really because they kind of can be lined up side by side.
Mhm.
Yeah, common problem with TI as well is
Yeah.
the
The
miniature
plastic.
bloat. Yeah, like having the you're like like there's so many times in TI where you are just like I am pulling all of my guys over onto the wormhole tile over here or like the supernova. They're in this tile, trust me, I promise. But
Well,
like we can't have all of our plastic in the same place.
Right, it
You
won't
know?
fit.
also another thing I like about the production of this game is that if I had to pick between like minis for characters and minis for like structures, I like 3D structures because I built Legos as a kid, like some people did. I like 3D structures. And this game does it for me because we've got the acrylic standees that are really nice for the units, but we do have minis for the havens and for the Imperial garrisons. And the
Yeah.
garrisons look awesome. They look
Yeah,
really cool.
absolutely.
And the
And
havens, you
they're
can get little
modular,
walls
both of them as well. Yeah,
and
with
they
the
get little
Yeah,
walls
I
walls and
and
love the way that
towers,
the Havens you get to just like put the little like crown of wall and the little
little
tower in the
tower.
middle of. Yeah, like they slot together really nice in a very satisfying way.
I
And the
wish that
building up the pagodas, yeah.
I wish that it were that easy in dwellings to put the little hats on the dudes because it's so easy in this game to put the little tower on the haven. I'm
yeah,
always like trying to wiggle that damn thing in dwellings to get the hat on, but minor issue, of course, not really an actual caveat, but yeah, again, the production of this game is so good. And
absolutely.
I guess included with that is the board. One thing that is another good thing about this game, I have so many good things to talk about with this game, is the board on the left side of it. If you set it up according to the default, there is a list of every single phase of the game, every single thing you need to check, and you have a little wooden kind of like skeleton, horned skeletal skull to bring down to do all the different phases of the game, which is a little bit like Dominant Species, which I like in that game. And in this game, it's not as important as in Dominant Species, where like that's actually kind of an important core gameplay thing. This is just to remind you like what's happening. And this is the sort of thing where like in a game of this weight, you'd otherwise kind of have to keep the back of the rule book open with like the rules reference or have something to remind you what the heck we're doing in each of these phases. But the nature of the game is like, okay, we'll do this, this, this. We'll do actions phase. Let's just do it all of our normal stuff, and we kind of go down. And so there's very little like mental fatigue on the individual player because like you can't forget anything regarding phases because you just go down the list that's there on the board. Like you, it's impossible to not do it correctly even on your first play, you know?
Yeah, there's so many games that would have the detailed rules in the back of the rule book and would give you a player aid that like said the titles of each phase, and then you would have to be referencing back and forth or whatever. This, as you go through the phases, it's got basically all the details you could want or need about what's happening in that phase. And most of the meat of the game is in the action phase. And it's kind of a small blurb on this thing. So you're doing that most of the time. It's really nice to then have this huge great reference for the rest of the phases, for the phases where scoring is happening, or where enemies are moving, or where all of that stuff. It just organizes it so well. I couldn't agree more that it's a huge life improvement on this one.
Yeah, we did have a game like the first game we played just like yes like on Sunday was like we lost.
Yeah, we did.
We all agreed that we were like in a bad enough situation that it was like, you know,
It was untenable.
it was completely untenable. But I think it's a testament to how much we enjoy this game that we were like, yeah, they win. Let's just like rip a new one
Yeah.
and call it good. Like they like, let's just start over, get some new tiles out here. Let's just figure it out and like we'll play another game because they got us, you know.
They really got us good. Yeah. That was brutal. That was really brutal. I think it had also been a while since our last play, and so like we were cocky.
Yeah, I was
We
way
were
too
cocky,
cocky.
but we were also quite unlucky, I think.
We were
Yeah.
really unlucky. Being
Yeah,
unlucky was worse than being cocky. We got really unlucky. Like
yeah.
the dice were not on our side. And an
It-
early game of this game is when you're most vulnerable to that kind of bad luck. You don't have much to, you might have only one or two ways, if any, to mitigate a bad roll.
Yeah.
And especially if it's a big battle early on, and it goes poorly, it's difficult to recover from. It might take you like a whole round of the game to really come back and meaningfully help your allies.
Yeah, I believe the one of the turning points was it was like, okay, I could probably handle a horde. Like we got a skeleton put down. We have three skeletons next to my home. Also, he won't start with an activation token, surely. And then we like draw the one that starts with an activation token. So and it was like, well, I've got like dudes there, like they've got a decent chance. I've got an archery phase. Oh, you skipped the archery phase with that guy. Um
yeah, you were all ready to go archery mode, and I think, got two different chaos units in a row, or maybe a chaos unit and an imperial unit that just completely stopped your archery stuff. And then you also rolled poorly. And then I went with a full uh, 5-man stack of elite units against like a level 2 garrison and just like got wiped. And it was what the heck? It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think being willing to say, okay, look, there's gonna be some variance in this game. Again, you're gonna have some really good combats where you get lucky. You're gonna have some really bad ones where you get unlucky. Being willing to say, look, this is all the unlucky stuff is happening right at the beginning, and we're too far behind, and let's just restart. You could say we probably saved ourselves like 2 hours of playing it out to only lose by 30 points each or something. So I was glad we just called it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we also do have like and you can tailor the difficulty of this game pretty well. Like we have some of the Red Skull stuff in there, which is like there's like some Red Skull tiles, quests.
We
Um
have everything Red Skull added except for one quest that I removed from the game entirely. I permanently exiled it.
what was the
Whoa.
quest?
Yeah, what's that about?
Yeah.
The one quest I removed is a advanced quest that removes, I forget if it's one or if it's two, but it removes druids from the game entirely. They're just gone. And I
Huh.
think that's just like one step too far. I
Yeah.
saw it came out in a game, and I forget how you determine what druids it takes, but I remember it took like an important druid that we were relying on, and it was just backbreaking. We might have still barely gotten the win, but I think I felt like it wasn't a fun increase in difficulty. Like I would have rather it been an event that was like a new legion spawns or a new horde spawns, but it taking the druids away felt like, man, I don't
Yeah,
really
and
like that.
there was already
Yeah.
a quest we saw last game, which was there's one where you can remove curses by sacrificing a druid if you like succeed the quest. And then like you can reattempt you can keep the quest and do it again if you sacrifice a druid. Which is like it gives you some control of like, well, that one was kind of like crap anyway, so we're just gonna get rid of that guy.
Yeah, I think that's better, and obviously that's still in the deck. It's just that particular one I felt like was over the line
Yeah.
a little bit. Um, I did want to talk a little bit about the expansion that I do not have. So when I went to buy the game on Facebook Marketplace off this guy, he had the base game and he had the first expansion. I assume he backed it in the first campaign. But there it is worth mentioning that in the expansion that I do not have, they actually address one of the issues that we have with the game, which is sort of that in the early game, a bad roll can just spiral things out of control and just end the game basically. In the expansion that we do not have, one of the new things that they add is this, they replace druids with the new druids. Like they have a whole new set of druids. And so you can just keep all the old druids in the box. And the new druids can generate this resource called ether. And they're like little yellow, delicious looking lozenge tokens. And you can spend one to re-roll all of your dice once per combat.
Hmm.
Huh.
And so in early game, you might have access, like the first druid might give you access to having a few of these. And once they're gone, like there's a finite amount of them that can be used per game. Like if you use it, like that's out of the ether pool forever for that play. So you can only do it so many times, but it would let you sort of be like, okay, I rolled all blanks. I can at least get something better than this, you know?
Is
Yeah.
it like a shared resource?
It's a resource. I don't know the expansion. I actually have the rulebook pulled up for the expansion, and I remember reading about this, but it says any player may remove one ether from any druid to reroll all their dice once per roll. You may not use it to assign symbols or use feats, items, or other effects before you make this decision. And you may also remove one to activate a god power on a druid card.
Hmm.
So those are the two things you can do with it. Um, so they kind of change up the druid mechanics a little bit, and that sounds cool.
Yeah, I
I think
think so
that
Yeah.
too. Yeah. A little bit of
so
mitigation.
I think that must have been something that they noticed either in playtesting or just from people complaining about the early game sometimes being pretty rough. And so again, I don't have the expansion. I can't confidently say that it fixes or even is maybe too heavy a hand, but seems like that helps with that particular con. Um, Adds some other things too. It adds mercenaries. It adds those other two factions. It adds the ability to make the capital asymmetrical, like
Huh.
the center of the map where the Imperials spawn from. You can give them like a different capital,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and each of the capitals has its own special thing that changes up the game a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
That's cool.
yeah, so I will definitely be acquiring this once the next campaign comes around, and we'll give it a try once it eventually comes in. But it all sounds good to me.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you got the mini expansion while we're talking about the expansions of the blessings, because I really think that adds. I like that we get like a little extra thing for beating the bosses. And it also incentivizes you not to just smash the action figures against each other. Because like if the chaos gets the kill, then you don't get to get the blessing. So there's like a little bit more of an incentive
Yeah, I
than
like that. It makes it
the
so like, oh, maybe I do want to try and get the kill here, or like try and orchestrate them being left at low threat so that you can come and up and kill steal them and or last hit them and get the blessing. And the blessings are all really cool. I think there's one that was kind of underwhelming, but a lot of them are really cool. and I don't think any of them are like game breaking or anything, but they're all effects that because they're one-time effects, they're all things that kind of contribute to the suspense and the kind of like the highs and lows of the game. It's like I have this super good, cool resource. I need to save it for when it really matters. And so you have it lurking in your head, and you're like, once the final battle comes, I will be ready to bust out what was it, the red mist? No,
The Red Song.
the red song. Yeah, bust out the red song, or like
The red
get
song is so
the
crazy.
red song is really good. And then or get like the clutch two shields or something
Right.
like that, which is just gonna and those are the sorts of moments that are really fun in this game where like things go really wrong, but you have a way to sort of barely rescue yourself. Because I think that's sort of the feel of this game is like everything's always going wrong. You just have to like figure out how to somehow make it through.
Yeah, a lot of the items can do that. A lot of the feats can do that. Some of the feats, which is like your hero's specific deck and your uh periodically getting a choice of one of two feats or drawing just one off the top with certain effects um of these cards throughout the game, and they kind of make your faction unique, right? Uh there's some of those feats that are a one-time use and thus have like these really powerful abilities. It's like come in and save you or what have you. So there's a lot of that going on between items and feats and all of it.
Yeah, one of the base game factions, the one that I don't like actually, the one that has a bunch of cannon fodder, they can permanently remove their own basic units from the game for extremely powerful effects, like being able to just automatically blow up garrisons by I said thematically probably kamikazeing like their guys loaded with explosives or something into garrisons and doing that kind of thing. It's just I don't know. I kind of like having my basic units though. But that
Right.
said, I mean, it's probably quite efficient to do so, like at the right time, especially at the end of the game when they're not doing much else for you. Um,
Yeah, and you don't need a ton of units. If you've got like five good ones, that's usually what you kind of end up using, you know? So if
you have
you
like exactly enough
yeah,
units to be able to field two forces in this game, I feel like, but not more than that.
yeah. Unless you're playing like the Haquan or something. I think they get like a total of nine, which is like I guess
Yeah.
just enough for like maybe like two. I guess you
I
have
think
like
their plastic limit is less of a big deal than just like how the heck do I build a second haven, you know?
Yeah.
That's probably not true. That might have just been last game. I've played them before and been able to get the second haven, and it wasn't easy, but I got it, you know.
We had
Whereas
a lot of mountains in that play, which were making it kind
yeah,
of awkward. Yeah.
definitely. A lot of
yeah.
mountains and then places where I could build where, mountains weren't blocking me. Well, the enemy was showing up there, is what are you gonna do? So
We
Yeah.
managed to protect your second haven in the very end of the game, though.
yeah,
So
they went pretty
through
hard at the
some
end.
through a heroic sacrifice by the Renegade Legion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to talk about on cons for this game. Like I said, I think a minor con is just sort of like there are elements in combat where you're kind of adjusting threat. And we played this game enough times now where we kind of have a system like we'll bring that card over to where the dice rolling area is on the table and sort of adjust it over there and then put it back in the other area once we're done. And so we kind of have a system and it's fine.
There's
Um,
still a little bit though, even outside of the boss units that you're fighting. When deciding what of your own units you're going to get rid of, well, it's a lot harder to bring those over to the uh, dice rolling area, let's
yes,
say.
that is
And so
true.
you're
Yeah.
still like kind of walking back and forth and like, oh, well, I guess we're out of the archery phase now, so maybe I'll lose this guy. But then again, what if I win the combat? I really want to keep my archery guy, so maybe I lose, this clash guy that has a, slightly better dice or, there's still a little bit of that going on. It's ultimately quite minor. You get over it pretty quick and the combat is fun enough that I don't have too much of a complaint there. It is worth noting.
Yeah. Yeah, and man, like that is like the minor bit of fiddliness, and it's probably the like I am pretty adept at board games, but like I said, I don't feel this one's weight as much as I do with some of the other games that are in a similar weight category. I feel like you end up being able to like mitigate a lot of it.
It,
Um,
it being co-op as well, there's a little bit less pressure on the
yeah,
individual because everyone's helping each other understand the game and like even if they're not directly quarterbacking, they can give advice and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
yeah.
I I betcha you could get a really bad gaming group on this one, though. Like I think you could have a really terrible experience with this game if like you showed up and there was some jerk who like was taken a little bit too seriously and trying to, quarterback a little and trying to tell everybody what to do. So, maybe don't be that person.
The nature of the dice is like, are you going to blame somebody for not rolling well? It's like you were supposed to win that battle. Why didn't you win it? And it's like, well, I mean, I just rolled badly. I didn't have what I needed to mitigate it. And then, is the guy going to get angry at me for rolling
Right.
blanks on my white dice again?
Yeah, this straw man we're constructing.
The straw man bad board gaming companion. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Let's say if you're, 95th percentile or above like levels of controlling behavior, this is not a game for you.
yeah,
But most people can play this one.
it does exist in a weird niche where like the person who wants to play this game or enjoys this game is somebody who is not a strict Euro gamer, but they're
Hmm.
also not a strict like dice chucker because there's a lot of strategy in this game, despite there being a lot of dice chucking. You still have to know like how to organize your own troops and how to manipulate the enemy, and there's stuff to think about and there's stuff to strategize about. So there is kind of like an interesting melding of like different genres and different sort of levels of acceptance of RNG to really enjoy this game. But I think that the fact that I'm not a huge dice fan, but I really enjoy this game is a testament that it can win you over. Um, Certainly possible to have a play of this game where things don't go well. And like I said, we just called it. We were like, okay, yeah, we lost. We don't need to play this out. Like sometimes you just have to realize if it's over, the game
Yeah.
got you.
Hopefully that doesn't happen on anybody's first play. And maybe it won't if you do a little bit of a lower difficulty to familiarize yourself with how everything's working.
Yeah,
Yeah,
first play on a low difficulty is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
definitely. And like I do like that about this game. Whereas it felt weird in like something like Fractal. Like Fractal had a bunch of like expansions and stuff that you could like add into it to change how it worked. And like I'm much more excited for something like that in this game. Like, it's like, oh yeah, bring me the special druids, get me the like weird harder cards, like I want to like tinker with a lot of the stuff in this. Like I want to tinker the difficulty. And that feels natural to kind of end up being in sort of like a homebrew for like how difficult it is. Like you can tailor your experience to it pretty well of like how chill it's gonna be, or like I think we play on like pretty much nightmare mode, but with the blessings, I think it really mitigates that and ends up being really fun. Like,
Yeah,
I think the
I would
game being
agree.
about as evil as it can be, but you just having some tools to fight it feels the best overall. And it's like you have to hit the lowest lows to hit the highest highs on this roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
There are some games though where like I feel like it's really hard to parse what modules to use. I felt that way about the expansion for Inish, Seasons of Inish at first. I've kind of figured out now that I just don't like most of the modules.
yeah,
But at first it was like, what the hell modules do you use? Or like when we played Eclipse, we did Eclipse for the first time and we are like, oh, well, this is like the starter game. We better use the human factions. I think Ben and I played. And it was like, no way, man. That's like totally not the right way to play Eclipse the first time. There's 0% in my mind that you shouldn't just be doing the alien factions from the get-go. but the game sort of pushes you towards this thing, and um, I don't know. It's sometimes it's pretty hard to figure out even what the best way to play a game is. I think I might have felt that way about Dune had Will not had the experience with it because that game seems to have a lot of options for what you can play.
I just
Um,
have to put my foot down early and be like, okay, this is how we're playing the game, and
yeah,
nobody
no
argue with me.
advanced Karama,
We're just not getting into this nonsense. We're just gonna have a good play of the game. Nobody argue with me on what we're doing for the rule set.
right? And I think it's good when you have that direction, and it's good when a game can give you it. And in this game, I almost feel like you don't even really need it because kind of all the additions that there are um, have their place and can work well with each other, or you can leave them out, whatever. I don't think you're going to be struggling too much on this one. I think you'll be pretty happy however you end up.
That's why I'm happy to see if I can get that other expansion too, because I think that's all gas. It's all good stuff that I want to see added to the game. More variety, more different, things that can happen. The two extra factions both seem more asymmetrical than the eight that are in the base game in the first expansion. And the new druid system sounds really cool. Like I said, hopefully that solves a little bit of the early game bad stuff that can happen. And
Yeah.
they also added an additional level of difficulty, I assume, to counterbalance the fact that the ether stuff is there, where you can give each Legion and Chaos an additional immediate effect that you're drawing from a bag if you want to give them even
Oh,
more
really?
nasty, if you want to give them more nasty stuff they can do.
Some of those immediate effects are brutal.
I
Now,
s-
I don't
yeah,
know if they would be out of the bag
I
in
assume
this
it would not
expansion,
be
but
as bad as some of the crazy immediate ones that can
right.
happen like on the card, but I don't have it, so I can't
But
look.
even the nature of it being like, okay, yeah, and then some crap that you haven't planned for and don't have time to plan for is going to happen. It's like, oh God, oh
Yeah,
brother.
I'm not as sure that I'll add that, but I would certainly add the rest of those mechanics.
Right, right. Could be fun. Could be fun to try.
I think we did have a bit of a sour time with like a four-person play on this one, and I do think that three is about right for this. I don't think it was like even we didn't have a good time. I think it just lasted like an extra 2 hours. Like, I think
Mm.
it was just like the fourth person, like having a fourth person, and we were also having to teach it to them. It ended up just like adding a bunch of time that like it dragged a little bit with like four people. Because
This
like
is
you, yeah,
I think this is a game that I can actually see soloing for like people that enjoy playing solo board games. I think this is like actually would be pretty fun to solo because it's just the game creates a story. However, I do think two or three is probably the right player count for this game. Um, Certainly I've enjoyed every two-player and three-player play we've had of this game. And yeah, four, it might drag a little bit, just a little bit too much. Uh,
There's enough going on though. If you're like going into it and mentally you're prepared for like, okay, I might be playing a 6 hour game with four people. That's pretty long. I mean,
it
you're
is, yeah.
creeping up on
If
Twilight
you
Imperium type times. But if you're prepared for that, I think you'll still have a good time. I think you'll still enjoy this one.
yeah. I think we just needed snacks that day. I think that might have been
Oh,
the
it was the hypoglycemia setting.
Yeah,
yeah.
if there were a pizza buy, then we would have been good.
Yeah, that might have been part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this does occupy an interesting niche. But anyway, I think I've said everything that I want to say about this
Yeah, it
game. I
might
don't
be
know about you
talked
guys.
out. Yeah.
You want to
Yo,
move to scoring?
let's shall.
All right.
How about you give us your score, Ben?
Okay, I'm trying to calculate so that I'm not tainted by your scores.
I can go first then. I kind of am set on this one.
Yeah, I've
Okay,
got
hold
mine.
on. Let me get mine. Okay, I think I got it.
Okay, you got it.
Uh,
Well, now that you got it, you can go first.
I would
I, I,
I would
I'll,
hold mine
you go
up
first.
in
You
in
go first.
terms of
I'll
fingers,
go.
but I need a half score, and I don't have half a finger. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I am going to give this game a 9 out of 10. I think this game is not the kind of game I would usually like, but I love it. I really like this game. And because it's not exactly in kind of the niche that I like, really is like what I like playing the most. I guess I don't give it a higher than a nine, but the fact that it's won me over and it's such a unique design and the production is amazing. As we said, this is one of the best board game productions that I'm aware of in the sense that it's not like over the top crazy big minis. Like the production is exactly what it needs to be to make playing the game efficient and for it to look good on the table and informative. And I don't think that even though it is crowdfunded, I don't get the feeling of excess from this board game. Like it looks cool, and maybe if there's any excess, it's like the garrisons being so detailed, like the little Japanese castles or something. But even they're not very big. They're pretty small. But the game is like exactly what it needs to be. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel like there's any real fat here. I don't think it's been overproduced. Um, I it's just really good, and I think that there are minor things with it that I think prevented me from giving it like a full 10, which is just that there are these minor quibbles we have with like sometimes combat is a little bit fiddly and sometimes it drags a little bit. It is a long game and but the really minor issues. And I think every single time I played this game, I've been psyched and I have a great time. So that's a nine for me.
Yeah. I'm gonna give this a 9.7. Continuing my tr
Whoa!
yeah, I do think this is probably one of my favorite games now. Like I and as we like I'm just mostly going to be echoing a lot of the same points that Will has. Is like there this is a very unique game, you know? Like this is not like I don't see there's not much to compare it to. I mean, it is like it borrows like 4X stuff, but it also does, like it blends the 4X and the co-op in a very interesting way. And it does something that nothing else is really doing right now. And it does it really well. Um, so like, you know, like that earns a pretty good point from me. Like that earns a lot of good points from me. And I think this is probably the highest I've rated a game.
That
I
is,
I
yeah.
genuinely like I could probably play this just about any time and I think I'd be pretty happy. Um I do love I would love to I love it when we can bust this one out. Um and we hadn't busted it out in a while for this like previous play. Um and it was like catching up with an old friend, like we picked up right where we left off. And like that's also part of the thing that like surprises me about the complexity is I think most of the rules stick pretty well and the stuff that isn't sticky is right there on the board. So like it felt like once you like understand this game and you learn it, there's not like too much fiddly bullshit that you have to come back to and be like, wait, how does this thing work again? Like you pretty much get it. And like once you get it, you can play it and I love it. I like it a lot.
I like it a lot.
Look at Lord.
Nice, man. Yeah, for me, I'm doing an 8.5 on Uprising. I really, really enjoy this one as well. Um, I don't think I can go much higher than that. Um, Mostly because I think it does tend to take quite a bit of time, this one. And on top of that, I wish that I was a little bit more impressed with like the balance between factions. I do think there is quite a bit of a difference between power level on factions. I also think there can be a good difference on power level between every faction has two hero choices. And it's kind of hard to parse which one is more powerful until you really dig into the details. The feats that they get in their deck are different. The starting feats that they get are different. There's a lot of overlap in the feats eventually, but yeah, it can be a little bit tricky there. And there are certain factions in this game that, after having played them once, I just wouldn't want to play them again, be it because I think they're underpowered or be it because I'm not interested in their mechanics. For example, the what is that one called? The
The
Horde?
herd.
The Herd. Yeah, the Herd just seems
Herd.
lame to me. Um, there's a few things like that with the factions, but I think if you're, a few plays in, you know what factions you like to do, you're on for the ride, you could easily give this game a 9 or a 9.5 even. Like it's that good if you can get over those two things.
I think it's a good point. We didn't really talk about that a whole lot, but I do agree they're like in my case as well, like they're factions I don't like to play. It's not like Forbidden Stars where like if somebody gave me a blind draft of Forbidden Stars, I picked a faction out of the hat, I'd be like, cool, I'm playing this faction. I wouldn't really want to do that for this game. There are factions I just enjoy playing more than other factions, and they're within those factions, there's a hero that I probably think is either better or just more fun than the other hero. I think
Yeah.
that a possible direction for expansions for this game might even not be more factions, but just maybe a more robust feat deck, like more going on with each individual hero, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe more choices for starting feats or something like that, something to really make each of these heroes feel like they're viable choices and they have their own strengths and things.
Yeah.
Dang though, 9.7, Ben, that's pretty high. That is your
Yeah.
highest.
I think so. Yeah.
I think it's a respectable rating. It really, really is a fun and unique and well-produced game. Like there's so much to grab onto and love with this one. And it again, uh, I'll echo that it's one of those where I would basically always be happy to play this one.
Yeah. And I didn't need to be won over when it came to dice. So, I
Right.
started
That's
with
true,
somewhat of
Ben.
an affinity. So
That's true. Ben had that starting point that was already a little higher up the scale. I think that um this game is like what crowdfunding is for. You know what
Mm,
I mean?
yeah.
yeah.
This is like exactly the kind of game that when I think of like what a crowdfunding success, not financial success, but like success of the model in allowing a product to be created that would not have been created at retail.
Mm,
Because this is more niche. It's got kind of an interesting production that probably wouldn't have been done otherwise. And it's a hard sell to a publisher to make like some weird mashup of a bunch of genres like this game, and also it being quite long. And but this is exactly where it can survive and exist on crowdfunding. And it's not a game that is like, why did this get crowdfunded? It's just a pre-order, or
right.
why did this big company crowdfund this game they're bringing to retail anyway? It's not that kind of thing. It's like a game that I'm happy it exists because of
Yeah.
crowdfunding, you
Commit
know?
with 25% bigger miniatures is
Yeah.
like the antithesis to this. Yeah. I'm curious, just a quick thought for y'all. Out of all the games that we've played, the game that I find to be most similar in like the feeling tone to Uprising is actually Dwellings. In fact, I think that Dwellings and Uprising give me more like similar vibes to each other than Dwellings and Andromeda's Edge do to each other, which is a little bit weird.
Well, they both have the fantasy theme, so I can sort of see
They've got
that.
the fantasy thing. They've both got like I love in Dwellings the big monsters roaming about and wreaking havoc, and I get a very similar feel from the big old bosses in this game. You know,
Yeah,
it's
and you
not
built
it's not
you
cooperative in Dwellings, which is obviously quite the difference, but I don't know, it gives me a similar feel. I think
it's
if someone liked
Yeah.
Dwellings, they would like Uprising.
yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it might be even that with the right crowd that just generally doesn't want to fight each other, that they would prefer this game over Dwellings. And Dwellings obviously more Euro gamey. There is the dice chucking and combat, but there's not like dice resolution for worker placement or
Right.
questing or although I guess there is that. I guess this is the closest to if your main color in Dwellings was the chaos color,
Mm,
where you're always
yes.
like rolling dice for resources and trying to take control of creatures and things. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and hopefully our next one will come along soon.
Yeah.
See
Insert
ya.
sign off here.